Oh, there you go. Dr. Lugo, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing really well, Greg. Great to see you, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It's so interesting. There's a visual element, and this is actually going to be an audio thing eventually, huh?
We try our best to keep up with technology for the kids here.
Cover all the bases.
There you go. That's right. Appreciate you joining the Square Pizza Pod. Excited to kind of dive in and feature your work and just learn more about you.
It's my pleasure, and hopefully I won't put your audience to sleep.
Oh, no. Not worried about that at all. As you know, we like to start hopefully with some fun intro to the podcast here, but rumor going around, you just got back from vacation. Is that true?
Yeah, that's definitely right.
Probably a well-deserved vacation, I'd imagine.
You can tell my tropical glow
That's right.
still around. I got to spend some time down on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica with my family. And, I don't know if you heard, but it was a tough time in higher education for the past a couple of years. And this was our first vacation actually in 3 years. So it was great to get away. The weather was great. The beach was great. And I'm rearing to be back, and I'm back in the office and back in the South.
That's great. Vacation's always good to reflect like anything else. So can we ask about maybe your one favorite moment or meal while on vacation or destination?
My favorite moments, I had a great time jet skiing up and down the coast of Costa Rica and visiting some islands and caves, and that's probably the funnest moment. But just spending time on the beach and thinking of life and catching up on my own thoughts on what we've been going through and building some excitement about the future is probably the most productive part.
That's great. That's good to hear. Again, I'm sure well-deserved quality time. And maybe a bit tangential, but I thought our research was complete on you. And then, of course, hopped on the Twitter machine and then saw in your bio, quote, "a bit obsessed with big storms," close quote. So feels too good not to engage on that question. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, maybe it's because of my background growing up in the islands. I'm from St. Croix, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and people mark their age by which hurricanes they experienced. Grew up on another island, Long Island, New York, and Hugo hammered St. Croix, and it also hammered Long Island. So I don't know. I've always been obsessed with that. And then you go out and you spend some time in the Midwest, and that especially the North Central Plains. That's the currency there, is talking about the weather. So I've always been the guy that's got 18 versions of the weather radar on my phone.
That's good. But didn't officially go into meteorology, is that right?
No. That wasn't a career choice. It's just a side passion. Decided that wasn't the course of direction. But I'm a grower and a lifelong learner. So who knows? Maybe there's a future episode of me, working the green screen and talking about storm fronts.
Heard it here first. I love dropping breaking news on the Square Pizza Pod. It's great. And gonna get back, I think to you and your really professional and personal journey here in a bit. But I think, currently, and stands out to me as a much former student athlete many moons ago. But as you serve as a president of Queens, you have 4 Queens student athletes heading to Tokyo for the Olympics, which seems remarkable. So
how awesome is that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty
incredible,
awesome, right?
Is that, and how many schools, right, can make that claim, right? Yep. We proudly sport around our campus the Olympic logo and the claim that Olympians are made here, because it's true time and time again. And we've got four Queens athletes that'll be in Tokyo. Annabelle Knoll, Marius Cush, Felix Duchamp, and Hannah Aspden. And we couldn't be more proud. It's a tribute to the type of student athlete experience that we promote here, that people from all over the world come to have that type of in classroom and out of classroom experience. And the sky's the limit to what you can achieve while getting that type of dual training here at Queens. So we will be proudly, rooting for all of their accomplishments in the upcoming weeks.
Do you get to go as an ambassador for the university when that happens?
That's really interesting. In original scheduling, I mean, to tell you a cool story.
Yeah, please.
We had a communications, it's our night school of communications created a partnership with the folks at Toyo University in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was on schedule, right, pre-pandemic, we actually were going to be there, just like we were down there in an academic and communications capacity in Rio. So it was actually on the original plan for a group of non-athlete students, but people that were focused on the communications and marketing experience and the sociological and sociology experience of the impact of the Olympics on host cities.
Yep.
We were going to be down there and kind of really diving into the whole experience and communicating out about that experience. So the pandemic changed that plan in a really unfortunate way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, nonetheless, pretty incredible, especially, I went to a small school as well. So to be able to promote for Olympians is great. And also, side note, but now I'm remembering, I always call her Miss Sherry because I messed up her last name. Swarthart, your athletic director, was my colleague in a Leadership Charlotte program. For those in Charlotte,
that's
might
great.
be aware of that. She was, I think, the assistant AD, but now I think she is the formal AD. And so a pretty remarkable accomplishment under her achievement as well. So shout out to Sherry.
Shout out to Sherry for sure. One of the best ADs in the land. And and by the way, she's pretty humble about her own experience. We're talking about a Division I athlete, played basketball from Michigan State, and we're lucky to have her.
That's actually, we always go off course, as you can tell, but that's a great point because I think that program was 2 years, and I don't think she told us until probably 18 months into the 24-month experience, and we were like, Sherry, like that's something I need to know, right? And but nonetheless, I think she has records when I Googled her and everything else.
She could fill it up.
Pretty remarkable.
That's right. She wasn't shy around the basket.
Okay, speaking of being shy, now we got to turn to you to learn more about your remarkable experience and what makes you so great currently. And I think what stood out as we were learning more about you, first generation college graduate, which is really important, aligns with the work we do at Shermco, but also many of the guests on the podcast. So, definitely want to learn more about that. And also the interesting transition from IP lawyer, intellectual property lawyer, to higher ed, which is not necessarily maybe a transition you planned or a transition that many people see going from A to B. So I'd love for you to pick either one of those and tell us more.
Yeah, so I am proudly a first generation college attender, as well as first generation college graduate. And I would say that, you used a really powerful 4-letter word that really wasn't a part of my youthful experience coming out of high school and even my college experience, plan. When you're a first generation college attender, oftentimes you don't have that kind of peer or family network that gives you the type of modeling of what's possible, or even the conversations to have about, how do you explore certain things. I had, 2 of the smartest people on the planet as my parents, but neither one of them went to college. They valued education. Both sides of my family valued education, and there was no question that I was going to go to college. But navigating how to get there, which one, why, all of that stuff. So a lot of my choices, I'm very proud of the alma mater that I went to, out in Minnesota, and provided me a world-class education. But I went there sight unseen. And guess what? Coming out of college, we don't have what we have here at Queen's University of Charlotte, which is a robust curricular approach and co-curricular and experiential approach towards learning what are the career opportunities. How do you use this great education, out in the world? Back in the day, you went to a good school, they say, we're giving you a great education, go figure it out. You'll figure it out. Luckily that day is over. So I kind of, as a default, went to law school. Went to the University of Minnesota Law School and didn't love it much, to be quite honest with you. But, you know, stubborn, keep plowing forward, be unstoppable, came back to New York and was, as you highlighted, an intellectual property attorney that worked on licensing, you know, rights in the entertainment business. So copyrights, trademarks, things related to music and film and all of that kind of stuff. And met some really cool people. And there's a little bit of a thread there. I liked working with artists in particular, not particularly the companies, but artists, people that were, you know, moving in their career to truly leverage their talents and to reach kind of another level. And I think that same thing is true of what I enjoy about higher education, right? Meeting someone that's here and with, you know, great education propels themselves into a great destiny. I practiced law for 9 years, and, you know, the bad joke is, you know, I liked it for 4, figured it took 5 years to figure out what I would really want to do with my life. And,
I mean, it's pretty good for somebody that didn't like law school to get 4 good years of enjoying it. It's not too bad.
Hey, those backstage passes are pretty cool.
That's, yeah.
I'm just saying, when you're hanging out in the show and, you know, you're standing side stage, that's kind of fun. You eventually you need more than that out of life. But so, you know, I took an incredible, you know, leap of faith that when I kind of assessed my life and what had been transformative to me, it was higher education. So my family and I, we went on this path 17, now 18 years ago to get into higher education. And that's where for the first time in my life, I actually started to plan. Like, okay, now that I found the area that resonates with me, that wakes me up in the morning, makes me really excited. How do I, you know, create a career path that takes me into leadership? And that's what the last 17 years has been all about.
That's really incredible. A lot of things to break down. I mean, I think I've shared previously, I'm also first one in my family to attend and graduate college, and still remember mom and dad and myself sitting at, well, I shouldn't say because I really didn't help much, but like sitting at the kitchen table, going through the FAFSA forms and understanding the process of college. And it's intimidating, right? Like it's hard, it's challenging, it's intimidating for adults and for kids at the same time. So I'd venture to guess that you going through that experience and the seat you currently sit in provides a lot of empathy for you to others and the rest of your team in those kind of searching through what higher ed looks like for them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, Greg, I shared that experience in the quite intentional ways in systemic ways that access to education, access to higher education is complicated, that has a real chilling effect, in particular on students who come from first generation backgrounds, lower socioeconomic backgrounds, entirely overrepresented by communities of color in the United States, and in most cases we've learned are completely unnecessary, right? And I'm glad we're seeing progress, and I'm glad to be one of the people that helps to shape progress on campuses and through national advocacy about how to take those barriers down and expand access. You know, that's in the best interest not only of students, but it's in the best interest of our nation. In a globally competitive world, we just need our talent to meet the needs of our 21st century economy, and all of these barriers are just unnecessary. It's you know, the equivalent of some folks will criticize, you know, all of the bureaucracy, right, in government and how that has a chilling effect on business. All of the things that we're trying to overcome in higher education that depress access are really parallel arguments.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I want to get to more about specifics about what you all are doing at Queens within that. But before, you know, you've had a really interesting career before you got to Queens. I think a lot of people would say the interesting fact I want to pull out from Colby College, where you sat, and we'll admittedly ask you an unfair question, but let's just play along here. Led a $750 million fundraising campaign, largest in liberal arts history. So from somebody else who went to a liberal arts school, impressive nonetheless, but also like maybe you can share some notes with the College of Worcester. So outside of you having a great team and you being incredibly smart and everything else, what's the secret to raising $750 million?
Great questions. And I think you can, you know, believe it or not, as you tell by looking at the market and thinking about places like Amazon, Google, Apple, all the rest of that, and thinking about what's happening in transformational wealth generation. Money is particularly nearly infinite. What is finite is our sometimes big ideas, the combination of big ideas, great leadership teams that can execute on those big ideas, and really making the case that higher education is the conduit to make society propel itself forward. And the planet's really aligned incredibly well up there at Colby with an incredible leadership team and singular leader and the president of that institution that created with that board and with that community a vision for how that place can make a bigger impact than just being the liberal arts college that they are, how they can truly be an important place in higher education and society. And when you do that and you articulate that well and you prove that you can actually execute on those big ideas, you find that people want to invest with you, right? Sure. You can get, a modest amount of support, quote unquote. You can talk to your alumni, please support us.
Yeah.
When you want to do something transformational, you're in a different conversation. You're talking about investments, right? Let's talk about what you want to do, what your legacy is, and what you think can really move the world and move the nation and provide something that's truly different. And that's a conversation that's deeper, more dynamic than support, right? And that's what we did there, and that's what we're starting to do here at Queens.
That's powerful. I think, and the reason I asked, one, it's incredible, but two, I think, a lot of our listeners are nonprofit leaders, for-profit leaders, school leaders, and resources always come into play, right? Whether they're raising money or writing grants or what have you. So I think that element is very important, but two key words I heard that I'm going to ask you to speak more about. I heard you say transformational, but also storytelling. And it feels like those two things, almost backwards planning from like, this has to be transformational. We have to tell stories in order for it to be transformational. Those things really stuck out to me as you were responding to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I don't know that I was intentional in that, but I'm glad those resonated. Because I think that's right. As you think of your mission, supporting your mission competes with everyone else, right? Supporting your mission. And there are lots of nice people that are doing really important things. And you need to do a great forecast and how you can articulate the case for support. But if you really, position yourself and articulate impact, and that's where the storytelling comes in. You've got to show the impact. People cut a check about this big, and for when it turns, to audio, right. It's a pretty small space between my hands. They cut a check for support about that big, right? To make an impact, to say, hey, I want to achieve that. Mm-hmm. When you show that the check needs to be this big, that, it's arithmetic, right? That we can't make that impact. We can't achieve that story without a larger set of investment. And I think the trap is in kind of, I would say, old school fundraising is how do you articulate the case for support? Mm-hmm. You actually really need to articulate something that's bigger, more important. The growth of philanthropy, the growth of competition in philanthropy, the growth of people really wanting to see how their dollars make an impact has gotten far beyond what support and articulation of support can do.
It seems like the creativity in which you bring to currency, but also at Colby, maybe all hanging out with all the artists and musicians and creatives rubbed off on you in those times as well.
Yeah. I think that's, I'm glad that, thanks for highlighting that. You hang out with creative people. I'm a kind of creative person, but what I really think I do best is create the conditions for creative people to thrive, yep. Right? I think that's my job here at Queens. It's how do I position this university to allow our students and our faculty to do their best work and to create transformational scholarship and experiences and learning that propel them and this university to heights that we can only imagine in the future. Yeah. So I have an obsession and a passion in living vicariously through folks, that whether it's on the playing field or in the orchestra or whatever it is, or in the lab, that are going to push boundaries. And I want to support them and make the case for how we create that undergirding landscape to allow that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to remind the audience, you currently are the president of Queen's University here in Charlotte, and tell us more, like how you position those students, that staff, all aspects of the university to be creative and really offer an experience what I imagine you tell others is unlike others.
Well, that's definitely a work in progress, right? So I am proud to be the 21st president of this great university, whose history dates back to 1857. Truly distinctive, historic, great educational institution that has grown, adapted, thrived, diversified in really exciting ways. And I've been here for 2 years. The vast majority of that has been in a pandemic, but also charting a course and a vision that positions us to be much more national, to grow our reach, to grow the scale of our programs, to grow the size of our programs and the number of students that we can impact. We have a powerful educational and co-curricular experience here, and it's just unfair for us to not give more opportunities, right, for students to thrive in this environment. And so that's where we're at. We've been working with our board of trustees and our broader community of thinking of our strategic plan and vision for the future. And now we're ready to kind of go to the market with a lot of those big ideas that are logical for us and sequential for us, but then position us to be what Charlotte needs. Charlotte is an incredible city, and we need to strengthen our approach to higher education and to build up, our existing, higher education institutions and build up our capacity and build up our brand so that we're seen as one of the best cities in the country in all ways, not just for business, but for education, for the type of talent we can address. And that's going to make us sustainably one of the best cities in the world.
Yeah, that creative class being produced by key anchor universities, right? Of any of the highest performing or most artistic or highest achieving cities, right? Those anchor universities are always so critical to that. And so knowing you all are positioning yourself in that way makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity that we need to lean into. And I think one of the things that we're going to make a case about is, investing with us and investing in us being a stronger, more robust player is an investment in Charlotte because, as you go around the country, right, you think about Baltimore, you think about Johns Hopkins, you think about Atlanta, you think of Emory, you think about Cleveland, you think about Case Western, you think about Pittsburgh, you think about Carnegie Mellon.
I think when you think about Cleveland, you think about the College of Worcester. Never.
You know what? You do.
I don't think
so.
You
There's
think
competition. There's competition about who you think about, right?
No, I know. Friendly joke.
But when you go, to San Francisco and Chicago and Boston, you say, hey, think about a Charlotte. There's a brand that needs to elevate itself on the private higher education side, and we are that, and we want to truly own it, earn it, and lean into that.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think, I'm going to push you a little bit here. You already broke a little bit of breaking news saying you might be a meteorologist here at some point in your career. Maybe breaking news number 2, you alluded to some big ideas that you're going to bring to market. Are you able or comfortable giving the listening audience more insight about maybe what 1 or 2 of those ideas looks like?
Oh, we're still at the stage where, we're talking to our early investors, right? So, think about the private equity model, right? We're talking to those inner circle folks. So, but it's really about positioning ourselves to create programs that will make a dynamic impact on the city. You're not going to be shocked, right, with recent investments that we've made around the arts, like the Gambrell Center, that we want to position ourselves as a leader, right, in the arts community. It's not going to shock you that in light of the growth of data centered and technology centered opportunities and positions and talent that's needed in the city, that we're talking about building deep programs, in data analytics. It's not going to surprise you, when we, are concerned about the scale of our model, that we're talking about how do we lean into being truly Queen's University of Charlotte versus Queen's University of Myers Park, and scaling where we do our education, around the city. So, I mean, those are some hits, but the big hits is that we're going to be in the business of growth and being as disruptive and as excited about that growth as we can be.
Yep. I appreciate you giving us a little bit there. I think, also, I think needs to be said outside of the incredible work you're doing, but the significance of your role, I believe as the first minority to lead the university, or the Queen's University, as well as the first minority male to lead Queen's University, and how important that representation is for you to sit in that seat. Can you talk more about that?
Happy to. And although I would say that, that wasn't a deep conversation during the search process, it's undeniable, right? Recognizing that moment and what that means for our community. I'm really proud of our board of trustees that in a really competitive pool, that they saw, not only my experiences, but who I am.
Yep.
And as truly an asset, and leading this university into the 21st century, that I was a good fit, right? Even though they hadn't had a leader with my background, that I could still connect the past to the future in really, really strategic ways. It does make me reflect on, my experience and my family that did value and does value higher education so much. It's really kind of almost a pop culture moment, as my family, we were one of the first. We had to see In the Heights, because we're fans of that musical, we're fans of Lin-Manuel Miranda. And, to think of that was a part of my experience, that intergenerational, play. And I think back to my grandparents, who didn't have formal education, but yet, oh my gosh, education, higher education. Yeah. I am truly their wildest dreams to think that, their grandchild had become a president, right, of a university. Someone is partying nonstop somewhere just because of it.
That's right.
They would be happier than I am because of it. And that was kind of a moment for me. And that's why it's important to reflect on that. But I think even more important, it's important to our student body. I think it's important to be for folks that are first generation, that are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, to see and model, to see what's possible, to say, hey, that Dan Lugo guy comes from a path that I'm familiar with. And, whether I want to be a president or not, that you can get to, the C-suite, you can get to truly live out your dreams, by sheer force and will of effort, and finding supportive communities that are going to support you, on your pathway. So, I do recognize it. I don't think we fixate on it, but I'm not ashamed of celebrating that.
Yeah, no, nor should you or your family be, as you said. I want to co-sign everything you said as well. And also, reflecting on our work, a little bit in higher ed, but mostly in K-12, we've been fortunate to work with a number of organizations working to diversify the K-12 teaching force. And within that, knowing the systemic barriers that are currently in place that they and us and many others are working to break down, but also just data, right? So it tells us nationally K-12, less than 2% of K-12 teachers are Black males. And of course, the flip side of that, nationally 60-70% of public schools are filled with minority students and Black males as well. So would imagine if we scale that out to higher ed, those that sit in president seats across the country, not many look like you. So the importance of elevating your work and the legacy and success you've already had, I think is important to represent for those of others, but also those that aspire to be university presidents.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The problem isn't on the talent side, it really is on the opportunity side. Oftentimes conversations around diversity, that dated back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and are evolving now was that, oh, it's a struggle to find the talent. It's actually really not. I deeply believe that the United States has both built and attracted a talent base that's incredible if we would truly empower them. And part of empowering them is this modeling and mentoring, right? How scary is it to think about our K through 12 system that is now majority minority? And you just quoted figures there that are, shocking, right? That 2% of teachers, might be, African American males. And so who do our students see, right, about the possibilities of themselves or the expectations that, of course I see, African Americans and Latino Americans and Asian Americans as high achievers. If you didn't see that, in those formative years in the classroom and around those educational institutions. So we've got a lot of work right now to get to truly build and fulfill, the supply of folks, and yes, to lift people up that are there, so they can have an even bigger impact, right? So they can in essence, their umbrella can expand, and in the interim, while we have this dearth of supply, they can impact more people.
Yeah, I think that's right. And not only is your job tough enough as a university president, but as many, well, really everybody, you had to go through a pandemic while leading a university. And certainly the challenges have been stated across, right, all sectors and just day-to-day life. Wondering, in the midst of COVID, did you see any positives, or were there any bright spots that happened from your leadership or from those of others on the university?
I think there were a lot of bright spots, right? I think, we are, oftentimes we think of ourselves, we think of our communities, we think of institutions and individuals that truly being selfish. This was a moment that required universities and university communities to come together. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that it successfully happened everywhere. We see examples of where people pulled apart, right? Where there was, festering doubt in leadership and choices and policy. And I'm proud of the Queens community and the way we lean together, and I think exemplified and chased our motto, which is not to be served, but to serve, right? That happened a long time ago. And we had an opportunity to truly put that on display. Really, really hard period of time, right? The choices that we had to make, whether it was in the fall semester of staying virtual, the way we came back in the spring, there was so much that was hard on our staff, on our team, and on our students, that it was only because we have ample amounts of goodwill that we can navigate through them. And we're not done with it, right? I mean, we're approaching another year that there are choices to make, and we're wrestling with those and moving forward. But I'm proud of the way our teams performed, and from a staff and faculty perspective. And let me tell you about a couple silver linings.
Yeah, please.
What the thing that I'm most excited about what COVID did for the past 2 decades almost, there's been this battle royale between online learning, place-based learning, rock'em sock'em kind of, punching game. Mm-hmm. And part of that really created these camps in the academy of folks, a small group who was very pro of thinking, how do we use this new media and technology to adapt how we teach and to teach better? And then a much larger camp that was like, that's letting the wolf into the hen house, keep me away from, I want no part of that. That's not my pedagogy. And you know what COVID did for us? It said, everyone in the pool, everyone get in the pool, right? Mm-hmm. And you know what happened? We didn't lose our way. We didn't lose our mission. What we learned is that, wow, hey, there are some really valuable things here, and there are some opportunities for us to think of things more hybrid, mm-hmm. In ways of learning. There's certain things that are truly best in person, and we need to get back to those ASAP. But there's certain things that can be done in terms of scaling access to our education, and certain repetitive types of things that are part of learning that, do you really need to do that in front of 30 people or 100 people in class all the time? So I think we're going to kind of come into a moment, and this here I'm calling this, right? We're going to come into a moment of higher education where we truly can say, what is a great 21st century education model,
Yep.
right? And it is going to be an answer that is a little bit more blended. And that's exciting. That is totally exciting. But the other takeaway is, place-based learning is here to stay. Go talk to a bunch of, K through 12 kids and tell them about how excited they are to keep learning online.
Right.
I'll tell you, that conversation is not going to go real well, real fast.
I think you're right. Yep.
But now that we can shed our political camps on this battle, let's get to finding out what's the best way, the most transformative way to create experience, to create pedagogy, and to really harness and elevate learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, I'm hearing you articulate either fight the change or go with the change, which I think is a staple of leadership, but also certainly highlighted during a pandemic.
Yeah, I agree.
And also, I keep going back to you as a, IP lawyer, but musically, right? If any artist, dating myself when Napster came out or Spotify, if they fought these like streaming platforms, which a lot of them did, right? They weren't able to either reap the benefits or just spread their work to a wider audience. And whether, we agree or not, those that did kind of were fluid with the change in music and in the creative ways, I think we're able to expand their work and do it. And so for your end and other university presidents who it's probably presumably making any of you uncomfortable, but to move with the change and adapt to it faster and ahead of it will put you and others in a much better place to serve students in the future.
Yeah, I think that's so really well said, Greg. And boy, you can connect some dots for me there, because I was there in that Napster fight. It literally at the time I was representing Chuck D. And,
oh, wow.
and he was in combat with Lars Ulrich from Metallica about.
Yeah.
And Lars is like, oh my gosh, these MP3s, they're the death of us. Don't know what you're fighting nature. I mean, and that's what Chuck was saying. Yep. This is going to happen, folks. You either harness it and go with it, or it's going to happen to you. You are either going to leave this boat, right? Think of yourself whitewater rafting. Yeah. There's no fighting to get back upstream.
Sure. You got to go.
What your expertise is in ensuring that you leave this boat in a way that still profits you and is enjoyable and all the rest of it. And a lot of people didn't get that. The music business didn't get that. It's a great parallel. I've never made it, so thank you. I should have been smarter than that. You've just connected the dots on that, where it's the same thing, right? In education, right? Technology is real. The disruptive nature of it is happening. It's not whether it's going to happen, it's happening. The smartest places and the smartest people are going to really, really be out front to figure out how do we use it in a way that preserves our mission, right? And keeps us in a position of being the experts in providing that mission.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I always liked Chuck D, but good to know he's opposing Lars and more of a philosopher and forward-looking thinker than others. So good to know. So we actually have a guest question. This kind of ties well, I think, to what we were just talking about from Mark from Wagner College. He comes from the president's office of Wagner College as well. And I'll paraphrase it, but essentially is asking the question, how does higher ed stay relevant in the midst of kind of what you already said during a pandemic, during likely, rising tuition costs, as well as kind of like alternative job training programs and kind of articulating, is this investment in the ROI worth, a coding camp or something else? So probably not a new question to you, but wondering in the midst of like your leadership and the innovative way you approach this work, how you would tell a colleague like Mark or others how higher ed continues to compete.
Yeah, I know Mark. Mark was a student at F&M when I was there, and boy, he's having a great career, and I'm glad he's over there in the president's office at Wagner. And I think, I think he of course he comes with a tough question, because he's an F&M guy, and I'm like, this guy
didn't let you off easy. I know.
No, this is not an easy question, but I think it's a really wise one.
Yep.
And I'm actually going to go with an answer that connects back to our early part of the conversation in some ways. But what we really, really need to do to ensure that we stay relevant is to change, right? We need to stop fighting this current and really say, how do we use this current? How do we use this moment of changing demographics, of disruptive technologies, of really devastating polarity, right, politically? How do we become the answer to all of those things? We need to not move out of those challenges, but lean into those challenges, right? And that's only going to happen if we truly innovate. It's not by, you know, sitting back and you know, resting on our laurels of what we've always been. But we do have to tell the story of who we've been and who we are. The public good that higher education provides for our nation and for the world. And by the way, American higher education has an outsized impact on the world. If you think of where the best scholarship, research, science, medicine, political, everything, it's totally skewed and overrepresented towards American higher education. And we've got to remind people of that and demonstrate that through storytelling. There isn't any better investment, right, than investing in American higher education. And we've got history to prove it, right? I mean, you don't have to look, you know, back in American history and think about the most disruptive conflict, right? The Civil War, and out of it comes the Morrill Act. The Morrill Act built land grant colleges and universities all over this country that propelled this nation to be the dominant agricultural and you know, industrial nation of that time. And we weren't before that. Trust me. I mean, we weren't on the cutting edge. We weren't England or France or any of those places, but we became quickly. If you think about World War II, and we definitely need to address the inequity of the benefits that came out of World War II. Yes, the GI Bill propelled this nation in powerful ways in making us the dominant business, you know, a place in the world, even though not all GIs came home, as we know, with open and welcome arms and access to the GI Bill. Right. We're at another one of those moments. Yeah. This conflagration, right? This tempest of factors of demographic change, of technological disruption, of political challenges. We have to be the society. We need to demonstrate through storytelling that you need to come back to us to figure our way together out of this. And we need to advocate for much more investment. And that's how we'll stay relevant, by answering those tough challenges and questions.
Yeah, I think that was great. I'm sure Mark will appreciate that. I'm also wondering too, and I don't know if you'll agree, but please disagree. You know, I'd imagine if and when universities, the ones that are most innovative and have this sort of leadership style you're articulating, if they are able to adapt, they have what could be argued as just more assets to move faster. Maybe not move faster, but at least move with the larger market share than a startup, right? So if Greg starts a startup to compete with Queens around one of your academic programs, it's going to take me time to build resources and, you know, build everything else in a team. If universities who have been around since the mid 1800s can follow leaders like you to adapt faster, to do more different models, varying price scales, et cetera, you have the real estate, the team, the resources to move faster and have a bigger market share. So I'd imagine those that do it, to your point, instead of being scared, could move faster and do it in a way that has a lot more expertise than somebody that's just like trying to start it up.
Yeah, I think that's the opportunity. I think that is totally the opportunity. But there are folks starting up, right? There is competition that's coming from lots of different angles and non-traditional places. You know, whether are there company-based educational models, partnerships with Google, you know, everything under the sun is there. But we can't rest on our advantages, as you ideally just noted that we have advantages. But if we leverage them, we can definitely be positioned to thrive.
That's great. Really appreciate you being vulnerable and kind of going deep there. I think, really appreciate that part of your leadership. I'm going to get you out of here, hopefully on a few fun questions, or at least interesting questions. And this one, maybe not as fun, but super, serious. When we think about bridging the gap around racial equity in education, whether it's K-12 or higher ed, and unfair to ask you for one thing, but we'll ask for one thing. What comes to mind is something we should think about to bridge the racial equity and quality gap in education?
Yeah, it's funny. I love that question, and I love those conversations around them. And I've got an answer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do what everyone would expect. I'm not going to say, oh, invest in Queens, invest in higher education. I'm actually going to say something different, right? I think there's a new baseline to equity.
Hmm.
right? There's so much that go into economic mobility and racial equity and all income inequities and solving those challenges. It's a healthcare issue, right? It's a housing issue.
Yep.
It's a justice issue. It's all of those things. But you know what is actually new, but incredibly empowering to recognize as fundamental to every one of those and the success of changing any of those? It's actual digital equity. Digital equity and inclusion. So that's a massive problem.
Yep.
What we discovered in COVID is that privileged communities and neighborhoods have lots of access to high-speed internet.
Yep.
They have families that get them all the right devices. And you know what? Built into their homes and their environments and their schools, they have people that train them how to use those devices and that broadband. That's not true. And that's been damaging, right, to educational outcomes, to people being able to qualify and manage their homes and manage their businesses and manage their accounts. And you really can't even chase those other problems in the 21st century unless you invest in 100% achievement of digital equity. Here's the exciting part. When you look at the numbers, it's horrific, right? It's absolutely horrific when you look in rural areas, you look at inner cities, you look at all that stuff. But can you tell me another problem that we could actually address? That, like, if we really wanted to, right, in the next 2 years, we could have 100% broadband access and everyone could have devices and training to be able to access that information.
Yep.
That would be transformative.
Yep.
And so, at Queens, we've got an organization and a program called Digital Charlotte that we want to expand into the Center for Digital Equity. And we're addressing exactly that. And we want to make Mecklenburg County and Charlotte the place that leads the nation in digital equity and digital inclusion. And as a result of having that baseline, anything's possible.
Yep.
And because you can get the information. If someone gets online today and knows how to use online, let me tell you what they can do tomorrow. They can apply to college, they can get a job, they can access health records, they can do lots of things that they literally couldn't do the day before. This is an immediate answer. It's a solvable answer. You can build housing, and we have to, but you know what? That's a long tail thing, right? You can address health inequities, and you know what? That's critically important, but that's a long tail thing. If we need to do one thing, digital equity, digital inclusion across the board.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. I'm not a scientist, and I'm also not somebody familiar with the inner workings of how to close the digital divide. But thinking if we as a country could go to the moon in the late 60s, I gotta imagine we can figure out a way to connect everybody to the internet. But that's for people smarter than I.
Well, we've got a bunch of those folks on our team, and we're willing to share and be a leader.
That's really good. The question everybody wants to know, President Lugo, what does square pizza remind you of?
It reminds me of my youth. It reminds me of going to the pizza shop and get a Sicilian slice. That's what it reminds me of, right? So I'm a New Yorker, and the dominant slice there is clearly the Neapolitan triangular slice, which you of course need to fold. Okay, anyone that's out there, you got to fold that before you eat it. But when you wanted a treat, you got that thicker, square cut Sicilian style pizza. So it brings back my youth.
So in your youth, it was a treat, to use your words, a bit above a normal traditional slice of pizza.
That's exactly right. Though they were thicker, they were I would say more filling, right? They had more heft to it, right? Just like this podcast. I mean, clearly it just has more heft to it.
There you go. Very well played. Very well played. Did they serve it in school, in elementary or high school in the New York area?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually how pizza was in school. The school pizza was square, or at least rectangular.
So yeah, we at least longer story. We probably should have named it rectangle pizza, but we're already too far into the square pizza. But I've told the story before. We found out it's geographic, that not every student in public school across the country had access to this wonderful thing we know as rectangle or square pizza. Turns out it was pretty geographically concentrated on the East Coast and not the West Coast from our anecdotal research of 60 or so podcast episodes.
I love it. Yeah, that's definitely how it was on Long Island. And, I ate lunch at school every single day. Didn't bring. I went in the school line, and I love those square pizzas.
Good. Well, we appreciate you taking time. We appreciate all you're doing for those here in Charlotte and students that attend Queens University, obviously in the Southeast, but all across the country and the world as well. So thanks so much, Dr. Lugo.
Hey, I appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for having me on the podcast, and thank you for elevating, these important topics to your audience and to the world.
Our pleasure.